Leo's story began like that of many other antique collectors. A hobby, a passion for history and objects that tell secrets of the past. But what he found at an obscure auction in a remote village was not just an antique object. It was something that defied logic itself. A map. But it was no ordinary map. It was something that seemed to have come out of a dream or a nightmare. He was neither a historian nor a geologist. Leo was an architect, accustomed to the precision of lines and angles. That map, however, defied all the geographical conventions he knew. The contours of the continents looked familiar, but the land masses were in different places. There was an ocean where South America should have been, and a huge mountain range where Asia ended. Leo knew something was wrong. He spent months trying to decipher the map. He used geolocation software, compared it with ancient and modern maps, consulted experts. No one could identify the origin of that object. The paper and ink dated back hundreds of years, but the geography was from a world that did not exist. The cities on the map had strange names, and the rivers followed impossible courses. Leo became obsessed with that map. He took it everywhere, like an amulet or a curse. He was convinced that it was not a fraud or a delusion. It was authentic. But what did it represent? That was the question that haunted him. This search for answers consumed his life. His routine turned into an investigation. He immersed himself in history books, conspiracy theories, legends, and folklore, all to find a clue, a hint that would explain that map. And it was during this research that he came across a theory, that of worlds that existed in other dimensions and that, for some reason, disappeared. It was a crazy idea, but it was the only one that made sense. It was the only theory that explained why that map seemed so real, but represented something that was not in our world. The lines on the map did not connect to our reality, but seemed to connect to another, an alternate reality that existed at some point in time. He began to look for reports of strange events, of places that disappeared without a trace, of people who disappeared and reappeared in bizarre locations. He discovered that the legends of portals and rifts in reality were not just myths. There were reports of something that people could not understand. Leo's obsession with the map and the theory of alternative reality grew. He quit his job as an architect. His friends considered him eccentric. His family thought he was going through a crisis. But Leo didn't care. He was on the verge of a discovery that would forever change the way we understand our world. He knew that the only way to prove his theory was to follow the coordinates on the map. He needed to find the exact point where the geography of that world merged with ours, where the fault in reality was, where the other Earth had been. He made a plan. Using the coordinates on the map and the help of surveying software, he identified an exact point in our reality, a deserted, lifeless place in the middle of Siberia. It was an inhospitable and remote location. The journey would be dangerous, but Leo was determined. He knew that the map was the key to the truth. And the truth, he believed, lay in that remote place. Leo prepared for the trip as if he were going to war. He sold what he had, bought survival equipment, and studied the route. He knew there would be no easy way. The journey began on a plane, but soon turned into an odyssey. Leo traveled by train, then in an old pickup truck, and finally on foot. He carried a heavy backpack, the map carefully folded and protected in a plastic folder. The coordinates on the map were his only compass, his only hope. As he moved forward, the world seemed to disappear. The forests became rarer and the cold more intense. The silence was deep, broken only by the wind and the sound of his own footsteps. The loneliness was overwhelming, but Leo did not give up. He was on a personal quest, a journey to prove that his theory was not crazy. With every step, he thought about the map, the lines, the names of the cities, the impossible geography. He believed that this was proof that something greater, something that science could not yet explain, was at play. Believing in the map was the only thing that kept him going. After weeks of traveling, he finally arrived at the location. The map pointed to a plateau in the middle of a snowy mountain. It was a desolate place. There was no life, only rocks and ice. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But Leo knew that the surface didn't tell the whole story. The map had indicated that the fault would be there. He set up his tent, lit a fire, and waited. The night in Siberia was dark and cold. Leo looked at the stars, but his mind was on the map. He took out the plastic folder, unfolded the paper, and examined it once more, as if it could give him some other clue. He traced the lines with his finger, imagining the cities and rivers that did not exist on our Earth. Dawn came and Leo began to dig. Using an axe and a pickaxe, he broke through the ice and rock. He spent hours, maybe days. The work was exhausting, but he didn't stop. He was looking for an anomaly, a sign that his theory was correct. And it was when he was about to give up that he felt something different. The ground beneath the pickaxe was not solid. It was as if he were breaking something hollow. He continued, and soon revealed a cavity. It was a crack in the rock. The crack was not natural. It was a straight line, as if it had been cut. It did not look like it was hundreds of years old. It was as if it had been made recently, or as if it had been made in an instant. Leo felt a strange energy, a kind of vibration, emanating from the crack. He knew he had reached the exact point on the map. The crack was the proof, the flaw in reality that the map indicated. It was the meeting point of two worlds that had separated. Leo was in the place where the other Earth had been. The crack in the rock was more than a line. It was an opening to the unknown. A deep darkness stretched inward, beyond the reach of Leo's flashlight. The vibration he felt was stronger now. It was like a pulse, a heartbeat of reality itself. The air around the crack was strange, heavier and electric. Leo felt an attraction, a force calling him inside. He spent an entire day observing the crack. He threw a stone inside, but heard no sound of it falling. He used a rope, but it seemed to dissipate into the air after a few meters. This was no ordinary hole. Leo decided he had to go inside. His curiosity was greater than his fear. He was an architect, a man of logic and reason, but the journey there had changed his perception of the world. He now believed in something more. He now understood that reality was more complex than the eyes could see. He knew that the map was the key to the truth, and the truth was in that place. He took off his backpack, took out the map, and examined it once more. He traced the lines with his finger, wondering what he might find on the other side. Cities with strange names, mountains in different places, rivers with impossible courses. He felt an emotion he couldn't describe. It was a mixture of fear, excitement, and a deep sense of discovery. He was about to step into a world that shouldn't exist. He approached the crack. He put his hand inside, feeling a slight sting on his skin. It was like static electricity. He felt a kind of vacuum pulling his body. He took a deep breath and entered. Darkness swallowed him. He felt dizzy, as if he were falling into a bottomless pit. There was no sound, no light. He felt his body disintegrating and regrouping at the same time. It was a strange and terrifying sensation. The process lasted only a few seconds. When the dizziness stopped, Leo opened his eyes. He was in the same place, Siberia, the snowy plateau. But something was different. The sky was not blue, but reddish. The clouds were golden. The mountains on the horizon seemed to float. And the silence was not an empty silence, but a soft, constant sound. He looked back. The crack in the rock was no longer there. The snowy mountain was gone. He was in a different place. It was not our Earth. It was the world on the map. He had crossed the portal. Leo was in a world that did not exist. The surrounding landscape was different, but somehow familiar. The floating mountains on the horizon looked like the mountains on the maps he had studied, but the color and shape were different. The trees he saw did not resemble those on our Earth. The leaves were a silvery color, and the trunks glowed with a soft light. He looked at his hand. His skin seemed lighter. The air he breathed was lighter, with a smell of minerals and ozone. Gravity was slightly lower, and he felt more agile. The feeling of being in a new place was strange. It was a mixture of wonder and dread. He was alone in a world that should not exist. The map he carried was his only reference. He opened it and compared it to the surrounding landscape. The lines on the map matched what he saw. The silver river, the floating mountain, and the silver forest. The map was not a representation of the past or the future. It was a portrait of the present, of a reality that existed and still existed, but on a different plane. Leo began to walk, following the lines on the map. He was looking for a city. The map pointed to a large city called Ethelgard. He knew he needed to find a sign of life, some proof that he was not alone in that place. The walk was peaceful. There were no dangers, no wild animals, no sounds of predators. With each step, he felt he was delving deeper into the reality of that world. The landscape changed, the colors became more vivid. The rocks on the ground glowed with a bluish light. The city, he knew, was near. He could feel the presence of something, like a vibration in the air. When he reached the top of a hill, he saw it. The city. Ethelgard. It was not like the cities on our Earth. The buildings seemed to be made of crystal. They glowed with an inner light, as if they were alive. The streets were wide and clean. But something was wrong. The city was empty. There were no people, no movement. It was a ghost town. Leo walked down the hill and entered the city. The silence was overwhelming. He walked through the streets, touching the crystal walls, which were cold and smooth. The buildings were perfect, without a single crack or speck of dirt. It was as if the city had been abandoned suddenly. He found a house. Inside, everything was in place. Furniture, clothes, personal items. But there was no one there. He saw a bed, and on it, the figure of a being. It was not a human being. It was taller, thinner, with glowing skin. The being appeared to be sleeping, but there was no breathing, no pulse. It was as if they had been frozen in time. Leo walked through the empty city, feeling the deep sadness of that place. The beauty was mesmerizing, but the absence of life was painful. The city looked like a monument to something that could not be understood. The crystal houses, the perfect streets, the sleeping beings. Everything indicated an abrupt stop, a moment when time simply ceased. The city was not dead, but it was in a deep sleep, a sleep from which no one could wake up. He continued his exploration, following the map to the center of the city. There, in the middle of a square, was the tallest building. It was a kind of tower, made of the same crystal material. Inside, he found a control panel. There were no buttons, just symbols that glowed with a soft light. Leo knew that this was the heart of the city. He touched the panel, and a holographic image appeared. It was a being, similar to the others he had seen, but this one was awake. The being seemed to be speaking. Leo did not understand the language, but the image was so vivid that he could feel the emotion. It was a message, a warning message. The image showed the being touching the sky, and the sky shattering. The being tried to hold the fragments, but they crumbled into dust. The being knelt, and a tear rolled from its eye. It seemed to be saying goodbye. The image dissipated, and one last sentence flashed on the panel, in a language that Leo, for some reason, understood. The phrase read, "Our Earth has been destroyed. The lines that connect us have been broken. We sleep so that our memory is not lost. Awaken our Earth when the lines are aligned again." Leo understood. The map was not just a guide, it was a key to a world that had been erased. The flaw in reality he had found in Siberia was not a portal, but the scar of an event, a moment when the reality of that world disconnected from ours. They did not die. They just disconnected, separated from our time and space. The flaw was a point of alignment. It was the point where the two worlds were closest, the only place where passage was possible. Leo knew he couldn't bring them back. Not yet. The phrase on the panel was a command, a mission for him. He needed to find out what caused their world to collapse. He needed to figure out how the lines could be aligned again. He returned to the place where he had entered. The crack in the rock was not there. The mountain of snow was gone. He was trapped in the world of the map. The map he now carried was his only hope of returning home, to our Earth. And the only way back was to follow the map to the next fault in reality, the next alignment. He knew the search would not end there. It was just beginning.